So welcome. If there's anyone joining us today, welcome to this amazing talk we're going to have today with Marcy. Marcy is an intuitive speech language pathologist and a language facilitation expert. And we're going to talk about late talkers today. So if you are a parent of a late talker, or you have an infant or toddler that are, on their journey of talking, so today Marcy is going to help us to understand a lot of things that contributes to being a late talker. So I see a couple of people who have joined us. If you've joined us, let us know if you can hear me talk right now, and making sure that sound is on. And and let us know where you're from. If you have any questions, you can put your questions in the thread as we go along. And after we finish the interview, then I will see what are the questions that you have that Marcy or I can answer for you. If you're watching on replay, you can go back to the thread and put your questions there. So everyone, I'm going to welcome Marcy Melzer, who has graciously accepted to be with me live today and talking about late talkers. So Marcy is an intuitive speech language pathologist and as well as a language facilitation expert. I can't say this word today. So Marcy's waves of communication. So Marcy has a wonderful YouTube platform, and she has tons of videos there. So I will put that link as well later on in the thread. So if you want to go watch her videos, you can do so. All right. So Marcy, let's get started. So tell me a little bit about what is it that contributes to a child being a late talker, having lots of experience, pre-COVID and after COVID, working with children and parents. What contributes to that?
So, well, first of all, thanks for having me. And I'm really pleased to talk to your audience. And the reality is that there are so many kids who are late talking now, and I call them all late talking. It doesn't matter what the root cause is. What I have learned after working with thousands of parents all over the world over decades of time, it's been 30 years I've been practicing speech pathology. I've never seen, like I have just recently, the power of parents, both in the process of blocking a child from developing natural spoken language and in the process of facilitating that natural spoken language. And it doesn't matter if the child has a big physical illness or not. The actual reasons that kids are late talking are not so much in the physical realm, which is where most physical doctors and educators are going. They want to label these kids with autism or ADHD or global developmental delay or intellectual problems or whatever. And really, there is nothing wrong with your child. They are just late in developing. And you as a parent have the power to control in the child's environment and in your influence as a parent far more than anybody else can. And so I believe that the blockages come in three areas. Yes, of course, there's physical blockages. And the number one physical blockage most people might think is autism or ADHD, but it's not. The number one physical blockage to real natural speech is ear issues, that fluid that builds up in little kids. And it's very, very common in little kids. And it might not even be consistent. It could be intermittent. They might have a little ear fluid, or they've had it when they were very young. And as a result of not hearing as well as they could, and the physical symptoms of having your head full of, all of that fluid and stuff going on there, the swelling in their throat, the postnasal drip, all those things that are going on, kids may develop behaviors that are communicating about those physical symptoms. And without them being evident, clearly evident, they don't see the fluid in the ears. It's not, coming out of the child. Many parents negate that, and even pediatricians negate that because it's so popular now to diagnose kids with autism spectrum disorder because it's a spectrum and you can have a real mild version. And of course, that's the diagnosis that opens up the payment for a lot of the services. So often parents aren't even looking at the basic and easy to fix physiological problems of ear, nose, and throat issues. They start looking automatically into neurological problems and all of those things. When I really encourage you, as long as you've checked your child's ears, that you move away from the physical part and you start to think about the environment. Now, remember, we talked just briefly, you talked about pre and post COVID. What I found, especially during the COVID period and post, was that the environment of these kids changed a lot. They stopped seeing parents and peers and even people on the street talking. And so if you've got a toddler who's 6 years or under, toddler or young kid, they missed really important times, a year or more of really important time to be out in public, watching and listening to other people talk who are talking better than they are. And if the child was at home with parents who worked or a nanny who wasn't talking to them but caring for them, or parents who were busy on things and maybe they put a device in front of the child or a television, or a nanny who didn't talk to them very much. And for that whole developmental period where they were detached from listening to moms and dads talk every day about what they're doing, they become delayed in speech simply from lack of exposure. Just like those kids who couldn't hear, they have lack of exposure to speech. Also, kids in their environment, even though they're hearing talking on the devices, it's not the same because spoken language is not just words. It's gestures, it's nonverbal communication, it's feelings, and even a vibe, right, that we feel from people. If there's a big aggressive person coming or someone who's more nurturing and caring towards you. Little kids, before they have speech, are keenly aware of all these environmental influences because without speech, that's what they're using to communicate. Their own gestures, their own facial expressions, their own movements, things like that. And parents can get in the habit of just responding and contributing and maybe even offering their own nonverbal communication systems instead of speech, because they give them the phone or they give them, the kids that are in therapy, they're getting picture systems and sign language and artificial nonverbal things to work on because people aren't believing that these kids have the ability to learn speech. But what we know from neuroplasticity is that kids' brains are developing every minute of every day. And speech is a developmental skill. So without the exposure of listening, because you've got fluid in your ears, or even hearing people talking to you and around you to each other, naturally, you're not going to pick up all the things you need to develop into functional spoken language. So a lot of parents, what they do is they try to be like therapists and they make their kids say words. In order to get the apple, they have to say apple. In order to get the iPad, they have to say iPad. And so kids do learn. They learn to say words, but it's not the speech their parents want. And in combination of limited speech and all of these other behaviors that are happening, that's how so many kids are getting, diagnosed with neurological autism problems. Okay. So now that's the physical and environmental, but then the biggest thing is the mindset of the parent who is caring with this child, because maybe you did have some time that you were separated during the pandemic, or maybe you haven't been talking to your child because you don't believe they can understand because they're not using words, right? They're late talking and they're using all these behaviors. So even though it's been a couple of years that these kids are developing, and learning. They're learning from the tech, they're learning from the books they read, the TV they watch, the siblings they have, and even watching their parents and caregivers. They are learning. But because they're not talking, many of the people in their environment talk down to them. They only give them exposure to language of a child who would be a year or two younger than they are. And so they can't ever learn the new language that they missed, because now the people who are talking to them are talking under their cognitive intelligence. And so they can't move out of these basic baby talk gestures and single words and mama, 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 all that kind of stuff. They can't move out of it because all they're hearing is that kind of stuff. The alternative too that parents do is they start asking their kids a lot of questions, because it helps them read their minds and understand what they want. Do you want this? Do you want this? Do you want this? And then what happens is they just build the habit of the child relying on their parents to talk for them. Well, I don't have to tell you what you want. You're just going to list the things and I have to make a choice. Done and dusted. I don't have to learn how to talk. So remember, kids won't learn any new developmental skill unless they're highly motivated to learn that thing. And so if parents are choosing to talk down or limit their exposure, then you're going to get limited output. And that is why the kids are late talking, simply because they're not hearing enough spoken language, because even brains that are impaired can learn because of neuroplasticity, but you have to be exposed.
Yes, that's true. So from what I'm hearing, there are three factors. There's that physical factor that there can be fluid in the ear. And I remember, Marcy, when my middle son was born and I had kind of a traumatic labor because he was back labor. So it took him a while to be born. And he was really quiet, but my gut feeling was saying, okay, there's something going on here. And because I've read a book, Andrew Weil, I don't know if you know him. He's he's a doctor, but also holistic, a lot of holistic work. And he was explaining how birth itself is very traumatic. And a lot of times there could be things happening in the spine, and it could be kids with a lot of recurring ear infections. For example, there could be a blockage there from the cranial all the way down into the sacrum.
That's right.
So I took him to an osteopath, and the osteopath actually released. And he was so quiet that first week, and then boom, like he actually started voicing and crying, which, that was a good thing, because, all of that, whatever constriction was happening.
It's communication that's starting to come out, because he can value spoken language and voicing and sound for communication, because if a child can't hear, they're stuck with their eyes and their actions, because they only know you understand when they see you performing the thing that they want. So interesting. How old was your son when you figured that out?
Actually, he was only a week old, because I was lucky. I was reading this book just before having him. And then I experienced that labor with him, and I knew, I would want to take him to the osteopath and release whatever constriction and compression he had endured through labor.
And it's true. The C-section births, they have a lot of ear fluid, and all of these kids who had any kind of traumatic birth, because remember, they're yanking that baby's head and kind of pulling them out by their head. And so the chiropractic and osteopath have been, in my followers, also a very common solution if that has been a problem. Instead of going straight for the ear tubes, they work with the whole spinal column alignment, and then it's not gone. Now, that doesn't work if it's an allergy situation. There are other things that osteopaths can do about that too. But I think instead of just always going to the ENT, the ear, nose, and throat medical doctor, and giving antibiotics and medicines and all of those things, perhaps it could be an alignment problem that's causing that ear fluid.
Very true. And that, as you said, that's common.
Yes,
with
very
childbirth.
common. Also,
Yeah.
kids who are late walking are late talking just because, remember, they aren't motivated to start to explore and turn things into language until they can get exposure to them, like get around and get to
Yes.
them. And they're so motivated about moving, figuring out how to get their body to move, that they aren't listening. They can't even
Right.
focus on their auditory development. So late walking is another one of those physical things that ultimately these kids are diagnosed with autism because
Mhm.
of these other physiological things that easily can be remedied. But because of this early diagnosis and early intervention, they're not looking carefully at all those physiological things. So it is important that you do holistically evaluate your child from birth and pre-birth on, like a homeopath would, I think, to uncover anything. And if you don't see any symptoms or identification of those things going on, that's when you need to move into the environment and mindset things. Because even the mindset of a parent who has had a bad delivery, think about yours. The
Yes.
whole reason you were reading books and doing those things is because you were hyper concerned. You were
Mhm.
very worried about this 1-week-old baby because he wasn't showing the kinds of development already at 1 week old. Think about the moms who have kids that are 3, 4, 5 years old now,
Right.
and they've had a pandemic situation or a lockdown or a separation or even a temporary thing like ear fluid. And it has triggered the delay. And now they're getting pressure, to do
Yeah.
other things. So it's natural way, all about, that's what I
Yes,
talk.
yes, because it's actually easier, if you try that first. And then the second thing you were saying is like when you were explaining of how it's mostly like we need to connect with our children. Like speech is about connection, and connection with kids is through the senses, right? The eye connection, the hearing the child, and the tone of voice we use, and all of that is how it helps our child also communicate with us.
Yeah. Think about what they're watching now. If you've got a child who's older, and what they're interested in, and then what your best job is, if they're watching it on videos, or if they're watching other kids, or if they show up to a party and they stay back and watch, before they start, they're taking a moment to learn. And that is an important time for you to connect with
Right.
these kids, because you can be their coach. It's really what I do when I work with parents is I encourage you to be a facilitator. That's why I call myself a language facilitation coach, because I don't work with the kids anymore. It's so much more effective when a parent is trained to learn to work with the child. And this is why, right? Because you have awareness of their whole physical history. You have awareness of their whole environmental history. And maybe there was trauma. It could have been environmental trauma. What if you moved? What if there's a
Right.
new baby come in the house? What if dad left the house to go move and live somewhere else, or there's a separation between the parents, or even worse, some kind of environmental trauma to your family, like it happened during COVID. People lost their home. They lost parents. They lost loved ones, they lost money, right?
Yes,
So
their
lots and
jobs.
lots of things happened that there was loss and trauma, emotional, physical, environmental trauma. And I think that shifts again into the mindset thing, where often parents feel like they're the ones that have to do these things, solve these problems, fix their kids, make them do things because it's on them as a parent to do. And what you and I were talking about before we started was how connection with the child is the real key to solving all these problems. If you don't have enough money for the kind of food your child wants or the kind of toy your child wants, it's up to you to connect with them and explain that situation to give them an alternative that will be acceptable or can understand. Otherwise, they're just not going to understand, and they're
Yes.
going to react and respond. When they don't understand, that's when you get the behaviors. Because when they do understand, it is remarkable how accepting these children are. They're incredibly accepting, but they have to
Yeah.
understand why they're being expected to do or wait or be or perform in a certain place. And when they understand that those expectations will suit them and help them, they will show up and do it.
Yeah, for sure. Children inherently want to connect with us. They know they need the connection for their attachment needs to be met. And, it's instinctual. Without those attachment needs being met, then they're not going to survive. So children will do whatever it takes to keep that connection. And their behaviors are just showing us they're trying so hard to be connected with us. And now if we have an agenda and for whatever reason, when they're not meeting that agenda, it's not about there's something wrong with them, but there's
Right.
where does that agenda comes from? And why do I believe that's important right
I
now?
love that. And I think, again, it comes back to that fear. And, you talk a lot on your channel about how our programming, our parent experiences, what we hear around us, what our partner influences us with, all of these things about what we should be doing or what you should be doing. And all that's projection, right?
Right.
Of somebody else onto you. And what your child is projecting to you is connect with me. Just connect with me. I'll show you. And the thing about tech addiction or obsession or whatever you want to call it these days, I just call it overuse, right?
Mhm.
It's because a child is using this device for finding connection because inherently they want to find it. And if they can't find it with you, they're going to find it with Mickey Mouse or Peppa Pig or even abstract concepts like 1, 2, 3s and numbers or Baby Shark song, because those things teach them. And that's the inherent reason that these kids want to connect with you is because they don't know what they don't know. They're curious. They want to see new things. And if you're just doing the same old thing, if you've got an agenda and they know what that agenda is, they'll turn the manipulation right around on you and find other things they can learn from because they've already figured you out. You know what I mean?
Yes, because we do, I had a few conversations with clients and it's the same dance that we're doing all the time. And so who is going to be the person who's going to break that dance, right? In order to improve the relationship.
That's right. What a great, important thing to say, because this dance could be fueled by the therapist or your doctor or your mother-in-law or your mom or your sister or even your mindset. I've got to do this. I've got to be this. I've got to do whatever. And all of that time you spend arguing with those people or your own mindset is taking time away from when you can connect with this child. And I promise you, when you just spend time with them, I encourage parents to schedule out 2 to 3 hours every day. Even if you're working full time, you've got 2 to 3 hours that you're with this child. Spend that time focusing on connection. The models of the words that you need to use will come. They will come because your child will tell you what they want you to talk about. I want you to talk about this train. I want you to talk about my snack. I want you to talk about when I can go outside again, because I want to go outside right now. And I want you to explain to me why I can't go outside at midnight, because when they understand, they will participate and they will follow rules and they will stay in boundaries and all those things. But without the connection with them, like if you put all the locks on the door, but you don't explain to the child why they can't go out, when you turn your back, they see it as a challenge and they're just going to break every lock and think that you'll be proud of them because they don't understand. They see every curious challenge as a mission for them to go on, and I'm going to get this thing and I'm going to figure it out. That's why they watch Paw Patrol and all those shows, because they do things and empower themselves and solve their problems. And if you're not helping your child solve the problems they have, and you're too busy worried about solving the problems you have, he won't sit in the chair, he won't talk, he won't eat his food, or the things they're doing that you don't want. He won't be quiet at church. He won't hold my hand in the parking lot. He won't stay in one place, and run away from me all the time. All these things, you either have things that you want or you things you don't. All of that can be achieved by connecting with your child.
Yeah, and not by forcing, because
And not by forcing,
yeah,
because you can't make anybody do anything.
exactly. And if just play it out with your partner. If you force your partner to do something, usually how that ends.
Exactly. And
Right.
you don't want that on you, right?
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
think that's a really good way to think about this. And it's another strategy that I really encourage parents to use is put yourself in this child's shoes, right? They don't have the language they need. What would you have wanted to hear if you were struggling to talk? Would you want to hear the same old questions and prompts, or would you want to hear conversation and additional information and more stuff? You also might want to start repeating yourself a little bit more. Think about how your child is watching the things they watch. Do they watch the same thing over and over and over? Maybe they need you to slow down. Maybe they need you to repeat a little bit more. That's how the connection's good. But I think the first thing you have to do is what Natalie said, put your agenda away of what you think anybody should be doing and connect with the child. And they'll tell you what they want to do, what they want to learn, what they want to try, because the only way they're going to learn is by trying, right?
Yes. Yeah. That's how we learn. We try,
right.
we make mistakes.
And we
learn.
fail, and our parents clean us up, and we put the Band-Aids on, but we learn from the experience. And this is how parents have been teaching kids long before there ever was a teacher.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So, Marcy, tell us a little bit then about what is it that parents can do now, if they do have a late talker.
Yeah.
And the child is 5, 6 years old and not talking. Yeah. Walk us through that process, how you work with the parent.
Well, so if your child is already 5 or 6 and they're not talking, you don't need anybody to remind you about the struggles you have every day in your life. I know that you have them. And again, you're thinking of them in the things your child isn't doing or the things your child is doing. And that's always where you start. So what I recommend, again, is that you create a plan. And I've made a workbook to help you do that. Where you literally learn how to analyze things like your connection and mindset before you even start looking at how many words is he saying or how well can he follow directions. Because remember, those are the most important components, is when you maintain your connection and your mindset. And if you monitor that every day through the graphs that I have in the workbook, and journal, there's a way to journal and write it down, then you can see. And then the other thing that you have to do is you have to profile yourself and your kid. Really, the way you make connection is you get to know yourself and you get to know your child, because remember, all that programming, that self that's talking to you in your head that says you can't do this, you need to sign him up, one more meltdown and I'll throw him out the window, all those things that your mind is telling you, you have to get on the same page with that mindset. And you have to understand how your time is valuable with your child, and you have a choice of how to spend it. So then when you realize what your child needs and what you need and what you really want to facilitate by profiling yourself and your child, you don't need a therapist to do this. You know yourselves better than anybody. Then you can immediately become inspired. Okay, these are the things we struggle with. This is where I'm going to start. And it might be the child's throwing or hitting or things like that. And you understand why it's happening, because they're upset and they want to connect with you. So you schedule in connection. And when you see the behaviors you don't want to see, you model the language for it. And it turns into language over time, because the deal is if you spend 2 to 3 hours every day facilitating improvement, it's just evolving, just like your little baby did at 1 week old. After not hearing, as soon as he started to hear, the brain started developing and he started making noises and playing and trying vocalizations to see immediately, how is mom going to respond when I cry this way? How is mom going to respond when I cry this way? So as soon as you model the talking, because as soon as your baby was born, you were talking about, oh, your diaper is dirty, I'm going to change your diaper. He's like, huh, I'm going to learn the diaper cry. That's what gets the diaper. And then when they cry a different way and you try to change their diaper and you go, oh, this isn't a diaper. I hear you're hungry. And then the baby listens to you talking and then they see you bring the bottle and all of a sudden all that stuff starts developing in the brain. And just remember, your late talker missed it. Maybe their brain's working a little bit more slowly, but you can build it all through neural plasticity. So you start by just talking about your life every day, 2 to 3 hours a day. It seems like it's so easy, right? Anybody can do it. That's how we want to make it to be. If it's too hard, you're not going to do it. So just carve out that time and then be conscious and connected for the whole time. Stay out of your head, stay out of judging, just connect and give more than you take. Talk above your child's level. This is what I just learned from my recent trip to Australia. I had the opportunity to work with 5 families who already knew me, who had already been in coaching, and still, because their kids are still late talking, they're talking below them. They can't help it. It's just sort of an innate thing that we match people where they are in their comfort zone. But you remember what you said is somebody has to elevate the dance. Somebody has to take them out of the comfort zone. And that's what you have to do in that 2 to 3 hours. You have to be the voice of change, the conversationalist, the one that stops asking questions and starts giving answers. Because remember, when the kids learn from you, just like they learn from the devices or whatever, they'll start practicing the things that they learn. And then you'll see the dance evolves. Ooh, mom's doing something a little higher. I'm going to come up to that level. Ooh, baby's coming up to my level. I've got to bump it up. Baby's bumping up. And you've got to be aware of that whole process through the plan. And that's why that analysis and those profiles are very important, because we change quickly when we're in this process and we don't want to stay in. And this is one of the problems that parents have. I just had a family sign up with me. Their child is nearly 4 years old. He got into school right when he turned 3 years old. They've been working on nonverbal communication picture systems at the school. And a year later, he's not talking. Even though he's been at school listening to other people, they've taken the focus away from that higher level and they talk below him. And they gave him nonverbal communication to use, which he got good at. But a year later, now he's 4 and still not using speech. Yeah. Because they've wasted a year. They've wasted a year playing with pictures.
He's not learning anything new.
Nothing new. Yeah. And everything the people are saying to the child, they already knew before they even went to the school.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. You were talking about, when you're changing diapers, you're talking to your baby and so on. With my last son, again, I stumble on this book about elimination communication. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. Yeah. It's about not putting a diaper on, and it's all about attuning to that physical need of your baby, and how it is tough at the beginning, because I never did it with my older 2, but I wanted to try it. And, but I can tell you the connection that I have with my youngest is it's way deeper. And I think
almost telepathic, right?
Yeah, because I had to attune. Okay, when do you go to the bathroom? Like, what are your signs you're giving me when you need to go to the bathroom?
Yeah. And we can do that. Every parent of a late talker is great at this. You've been doing it since they were born. Yeah. And as they get older, their nonverbal communication gets more sophisticated. Plus, now you've seen it a million times, that look that means he has to go, right? Yes, but you had to connect at such a deep level. How old was your son when you did this?
So I started at 3 months. At 3 months, I didn't put diapers on him. And to this day, Marcy, hopefully he won't hear this, but he's 9 and he hates wearing underwear because he was used to being bare bottom.
3, yeah.
3, yes.
Wow. Yeah. So amazing. Now, that takes an extraordinary effort. And what it does prove, though, is how powerful a parent connection can be. Because
Yes.
even though it's not natural to be in control of your bladder at 3 months old, in fact, kids rarely can do it. It was really you that was being controlled at
Helping
that.
him. Yes.
You were responding to his nonverbal communication at such a deep, deep level. And that's what these parents get into. As soon as they start to get out and explore and do other things, it's just a matter of connecting like that. So while that's an extraordinary example, it is an example of what I see. Because it doesn't take very long either. Once you start to get in this mindset and you spend 2 to 3 hours a day, really like, what does he feel about that? And what does he want about that? And what is he thinking about that? And then instead of just always responding to it, that this is the key here, because when they're tiny babies, you didn't have a choice but to respond to him. But at some point, he started to initiate and take his own responsibility for that self-care. And that's a different job for this mom.
Yeah.
You have to, in your own mindset, give it up, because literally you trained yourself to respond to every squeak, and now you have to not respond and let him accept that responsibility, transfer over the responsibility. And I think this is what's happening to a lot of parents that I meet. They already have this intuitive connection and they're responding to it so much that the child never has to communicate. They stay in that comfort, that telepathic zone, and they don't move out of it. And
very true.
When I encourage them to just say what you're thinking, because you are thinking it, put it into words. And this is what will help your child, because they're already connected telepathically, mentally with you. So when you turn that into language that they can try with other people, that's when they will tell other people, I've got to go to the bathroom. Where's the bathroom? You've got to help me find it, because I'm doing it on my own. And now he's 9 and of course has his own opinions about everything, I'm sure.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. What you're saying is to know when, to give them the challenge of taking care of, as they're growing up. And not doing things for them so much, and let them make the mistake. And it's okay to make the mistakes, because that's how they learn, right? That's right. And not.
Yeah. A lot of parents don't want to leave kids have that freedom. That's when they control. Oh, I know he's hungry because he always eats it too. That's a mom. It's a lot of work to be a mom like that, and ultimately you don't want to raise diva children who are completely entitled and dependent on you to do everything from feed them to change their diaper to do all this stuff, because remember, we're not raising babies, we're raising adults who we want them to go. I mean, it's never fun when they do, but we want them to go and do their own thing and learn their own way. And it's more exciting when you know that it was you that facilitated that independent learning, so that it's not just you that they learn from. They learn how to learn from you, and then they take that out into dad and coaches and whatever. It always starts with the mom. But again, if you're a nanny or a grandma or a primary caregiver, then you're in this role. You have the opportunity to help facilitate growth and improvement, or you have the opportunity to detach and just keep them fed and cleaned and watered,
Yeah. So from what I'm hearing, your work is very intensely focused on how to help parents connect with the child, especially when they're young, where they actually need us to be by their side, to teach them, to show them, and then to let them do the things as they're growing up. And it's the same with language. It's the same with being able to talk. It's connect with them, let them hear the tones, let them hear how we say things, let them hear the words over and over and over again, that then they can start using the words, and their brain is developing properly in a way it can absorb everything they are hearing and seeing and attuning in their environment.
Yeah. And we can learn from children who live in other countries outside of the United States. You're familiar with this.
Yes.
They learn multiple languages at the same time, right?
Very
Even
true.
can learn many languages at the same time, especially when they're little, because they choose to connect whoever chooses to connect, they speak the language fluently with them. They don't break it down. They don't baby talk it. They talk to grandpa who talks like grandpa in his language, and they talk to this auntie who speaks in her language.
Right.
And maybe those are different than home. So, it's not about restricting or limiting when kids look behind. It's actually about giving them more and trusting that they are learning.
Yes, yes. So Marcy, last questions. What are the systems out there that are unable to help solve these problems? Like when our kids are having trouble to learn or to speak, what are the outdated things out there that perhaps parents are still thinking that's the way to go with?
Yeah, I think the biggest issue here is the idea of taking the power away from parents. Because remember, this intuitive connection that we're talking about, this is something that you have. Anyone who you give your child away to, they have to develop it. And so the current systems don't have any room or time for this kind of intuitive direction because it's all exchange based. We know we can use behavior training with bribes of toys and snacks and things like that to get kids to do things. And remember, these schools and their systems, it's very important that you look at what is their agenda, what is their goal for the child. And if their goal is for the child to be participating in a school, then they're going to use things that a child might use in a school, like a picture system or a schedule or things like that. But remember, those things are not helping your child be successful communicating at home. However, if you flip it around, everything that you do to help your child communicate at home, to listen to directions, to follow rules and sustain boundaries in your house, all those things that you teach them about the stove is too hot and we've got to stay inside at night and we lock the doors or we wear our winter coats when it's cold, all of those things that you teach kids, it equips them to go to school. And so if you're relying on school to equip your kid for home versus home to equip your kid for school, then you've got it backwards, right? Because remember, we discussed how important this communication is. And even before and after school, your job is to help your child be successful at the school, even yours, from a natural, personable communication. They'll teach them the rules at school. But if you send your child to school nonverbal, the system will treat them less than they are. Only way other people will see your child for the brilliance they have, the light, the energy, all the stuff that you intuitively know your child knows, even though they don't show you with words or tell you with words, they show you with their behavior every day. Schools don't have time. They don't have mechanisms to evaluate those things. And these kids are feeling depressed and bored and underwhelmed, and they're perpetuating the delay. Now, it's just because the system is overwhelmed, right? Because all of these children are coming in now who have had limited exposure to people talking. Maybe they had ear infections like were happening before the pandemic. Those kids still exist. But then all of these pandemic, the masks, the time they spent alone with devices, or even alone with just their same two parents, talking down to them or treating them like a baby, perpetuating that babyhood beyond when it should be, because they're not out of those habits. They're not evolving out of those habits, right? So if you look at your home habits first and see how things are going there, and you start to make those changes, that's where you start. Before you start evaluating, is this school the right place for my child? Is your child the right child for this school? Is what you have control over. And so if the school has expectations that are outside of what you can take your child, I recommend you don't send them. Take advantage of the time you have at home. I've even got people who are hiring non-professional, non-trained nannies to spend time with their kids at home, facilitating natural, like you would send your kid to go visit Aunt so-and-so or go spend time with your grandma, and grandma teaches them to cook. Or you go spend time with uncle and uncle teaches them to wash the car. Or you go that's how we used to do in the old days. If there was something you couldn't teach your kid because you didn't have time or knowledge, you sent them off to an auntie. And it maybe wasn't a real auntie, but it was someone in the community. And this is what you can do now. How you can equip your child to be an excellent student and go there being an inquisitive learner who wants to try things and learn from the teacher is you've got to get them talking, you've got to get them listening, and you've got to get them encourage their curiosity. And then a teacher has something to work with. But if you send a child who's nonverbal, still stuck in their head and doesn't know how to connect because you haven't initiated that connection at home, they're going to fail at school. And the teacher's going to tell you that they're impaired or low or behind because all they've got is those numbers from those evaluation tools. And that's why things are outdated, because the new child who's coming out post-pandemic is communication shy.
Yeah.
They're lacking. They're missing it. And they are every single day showing you what they need from a communication standpoint first. They want you to show them what they need. And then when you show them how to learn from other people, then you can send them out and do it. But don't do it first. You're setting all of yourselves up for failure.
Yeah, so I love this, what you're sharing with me, like don't put them in the school system before that connection, because otherwise the school system is overloaded and can't do that for you.
No.
This is the role of a parent.
That's right.
And as well, then they start labeling the child. And then I know I've worked with parents who have, children with ADHD and on the autism spectrum, where then the child feels very defeated, then the self-confidence go down.
Oh, yes,
no
the whole
self-esteem
process
and so on.
of diagnosis and evaluation and the parents on the phone. Is this wrong? The red flag checklists. These kids are smart.
Yes.
They are aware. They listen to you talking about them, and they listen when you talk about them in front of them. And that's why I recommend that you teach them things that you can be proud of. And that's what you talk about in front of. I got him brushing his teeth. I got him washing his hands. I got him doing these things because I showed him how valuable those things are. And he sees how valuable they are. And he is a big boy and not a baby. And he's doing it. And that's what happened when I went to Australia and I worked with these families. And I was talking to the aunts and uncles and everybody that came to visit about this child. And they were looking at me and watching me and smiling and listening to me, thinking, that's me she's talking about. That's the good me. That's the proud me. That's the me who stepped out of my comfort zone and rose to the challenge because I was equipped and empowered as a child. And then when the parents saw that, they were like, oh, I need to start doing more of this. I need to start beefing my child up and empowering them, because that's what we're doing, equipping with knowledge and empowering to learn it and take it and try it, because that's when the learning happens, right?
Yeah, because we are their mirror to show them who they truly are and what they're capable of doing. And if we don't mirror that to them, then they won't know.
Well, they believe whatever you mirror.
Yes,
they believe the
exactly.
negative or the positive. They believe
True.
it all. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we have to be mindful of how we're showing up with them and how we are on a day-to-day basis developing that connection, and then the communication will follow. And with that interaction that we have with our children is what helps them to develop naturally, especially with your speech as well.
That's right.
So, and that's, I
everything.
love the message that you're sharing with us today, because I think it's so, so important and for parents to know the truth and not just go with,
Their power. You're so, so powerful as a parent. Don't give up that to other people who try to tell you things about your child that's not true, like they're low or dumb or all those other things that, you're feeling like they're saying about them, impaired or disabled, all those things that they're saying about your child. If you don't believe it because you see your child as a bright light, a star, someone who knows, it has innate knowledge and curiosity and wants to connect with you, this is the child that you want to develop, right?
Yeah, that's what parents want for their children. And we have the ability and we have the responsibility to do that for them.
Right. You do. Nobody's going to do it for you. Not this job.
No. And children want to learn naturally.
They do. We're not talking about something hard here. We're talking about the most valuable skill of their life. They can get anything with speech, right? Negotiate and argue and share their opinions and make change and spread ideas that they come up with in their imagination. This is what we want because we need these kids. They're our future, sharing these amazing, brilliant ideas that they've come up with. So I just really want to encourage you, if you have a child who's not talking yet, that this is just the beginning of a really bright future for you, because you should know that you are incredibly capable.
Yeah. And not to label the child.
Nah, it's not necessary.
Yeah.
None of it's necessary. The money they give you just pays for stuff that isn't helping you anyway. So just bypass all that, work with your child yourself. We've got holiday times coming up here. Focus on spending it now while if you've got a break from work. Find time on the weekends if you work full time. Just give it a try for the first week. And like I said, there's tons of resources on my YouTube channel just to get you started. You'll find a video that resonates with you and just give it a try. You'll see how powerful you are.
Yes, and I will put the link to your YouTube channel in the chat as well, so that anybody who's listening, who's wanting to consume your videos and get more information, they can do so. Marcy, if you would leave us with one thing that parents can do that's going to be so powerful, one simple thing, what would that be?
Take a deep breath, put your worry aside, and connect with your child. That's 3 things, but yeah, it all goes together.
Yes. I'm checking for questions. I don't see any questions, but hi, Senge, thank you for tuning in. But if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the thread. Marcy is also in the Calm Parenting Facebook group, so she's going to see questions as well, and she can answer them. Well, thank you so much, Marcy. It's been a pleasure having you live with me. I really enjoyed it, and I hope our viewers also has found this very helpful, and maybe it triggered something in your mind now that going to help you. And again, if you want to consume Marcy's video, I will put the link there. And thank you everyone for joining me and Marcy, and have a wonderful day and evening or morning, wherever you are. So thank you, Marcy, and I will see you guys next week.